History is full of moments where the fate of nations hangs on the collision of two powerful wills. This is one of those stories. It's a clash between a celebrated French war hero sent to save an empire and a self-taught Vietnamese general fighting to build a nation from its ashes. One was the Lion, a commander who put his faith in firepower and steel. The other was the Volcano, a master strategist who treated his revolutionary army like a force of nature. Their battlefield was Indochina, and their personal duel wouldn't just define a war. It would set the stage for a much larger conflict that would shake the entire world. By 1950, the French war in Indochina was falling apart. After a series of humiliating defeats along the Chinese border, French forces were demoralized, bleeding out, and watching their colonial empire disintegrate before their eyes. Paris needed a miracle, and so it sent its very best. General Jean Delattre de Tassigny, a hero of World War II, to salvage a war that felt utterly unwinnable. But waiting for him in the mountains and jungles of Vietnam was a former history teacher who now commanded a peasant army, a man whose strategic genius was matched only by his revolutionary drive, General Võ Nguyen Giap. This was going to be a clash of titans, and the future of Vietnam hung in the balance. One man gambled everything on firepower, the other on sheer human will. Only one would walk away the victor. In late 1950, the situation for the French Far East Expeditionary Corps was dire. The Viet Minh, led by General Giap, had crushed the line of French forts along Route Coloniale 4, the critical supply road from China. The Battle of RC4 was a disaster, costing the French over 6,000 soldiers and a shocking amount of equipment. Morale hit rock bottom. In both Hanoi and Paris, the feeling was the same. The war was lost. Into this mess stepped General Jean Delattre de Tassigny. A decorated hero from both world wars, Delattre was France's most famous living soldier. He was dynamic, arrogant, and had an ironclad belief in himself. In December 1950, he arrived as High Commissioner and Commander-in-Chief, given almost total authority to turn things around. Delatre's arrival was like a bolt of lightning. He immediately injected a new energy into the exhausted French forces. He saw that the French couldn't keep wasting men in isolated forts scattered across the countryside, so he completely reversed their strategy. He decided to consolidate all his power in the one place that mattered most: the populous and economically vital Red River Delta. His solution became known as the Delattre Line, a massive chain of over 1,200 concrete blockhouses and defensive posts that wrapped around the entire delta. This fortress would protect Hanoi and the port of Haiphong, giving the Viet Minh a simple choice: stay out or attack the French where they were strongest. Inside this line, Delattre would use his three big advantages: mobile armored columns called Groups Mobiles, huge artillery batteries, and total control of the air. He was daring Giap to come to him, so he could destroy him with modern firepower. It was a classic European strategy, a challenge from a lion daring his enemy to step into the killing ground. General Giap saw Delatre's new line as both a threat and a golden opportunity. Still riding high from his recent victories and now armed with fresh supplies from communist China, Giap decided the time was right for a massive offensive. He would smash through the new line, pour his divisions into the delta, and capture Hanoi in one knockout blow. He picked his target, Vinh, a town right on the edge of the defensive perimeter. In January 1951, Giap threw two of his best divisions, the 308th and 312th, into the fight. More than 20,000 men. He started with a classic diversion, luring a French mobile group into a deadly ambush. With the French reeling, his troops seized the hills overlooking the town, and the main French garrison of about 6,000 men was suddenly in a fight for its life. But Giap had underestimated his new opponent. On January 14th, General Delattre did something incredible. He flew his personal plane into the besieged Vinh airfield to take command of the battle himself. His presence was electric. He called for reinforcements, repositioned his troops, and then prepared to unleash hell. On January 16th, Giap ordered a massive, human wave assault with an entire division. This was the decisive moment. In response, Delattre ordered the largest French airstrike of the war. His planes dropped a terrifying new weapon in huge quantities for the first time in Indochina, napalm. A Viet Minh officer later described it as hell opening in front of my eyes, the fire which falls from the skies. The Viet Minh soldiers, caught in mass formations in the open, were incinerated. They fought with unbelievable courage, but courage was no match for napalm, bombs, and artillery. By January 17th, after suffering devastating casualties estimated at over 6,000 killed, Giap's divisions had no choice but to retreat back into the mountains. The Battle of Vinh was a massive victory for the French Lion. It seemed to prove his strategy was right. Strong fortifications plus overwhelming firepower was the key to victory. But while this one battle changed the course of the war tactically, the lessons each side learned would have far greater consequences. What happens next is the key to understanding the entire conflict. If you're enjoying this breakdown of military strategy, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell for more deep dives into history's greatest military showdowns. For the French, Vinh sent morale soaring. Delattre was hailed as the savior of Indochina. He had met Giap's main army in a head-on fight and had completely crushed it. But this victory created a dangerous overconfidence. The French leadership started to believe that their formula of hedgehogs, heavily fortified bases, and air power was unbeatable. They thought they had found the answer to the Viet Minh. For General Giap, the defeat at Vinh was a painful but priceless lesson. He had attacked the French on their terms, in open country where their technology gave them every advantage, and it had been a catastrophe. He realized that his army, no matter how brave or numerous, simply couldn't win a direct, set-piece battle against French firepower. The volcano had to pull back and change its nature. He would no longer seek big, decisive battles in the Red River Delta. He would go back to what he did best: guerrilla warfare, ambushes, and, above all, logistics. His new plan was to pull the French out of their forts, to lure them deep into the remote mountains of Vietnam where their tanks would get stuck. Their supply lines would stretch to the breaking point, and their precious air power would be less effective. He would simply wait for the French to give him an opportunity on ground of his choosing. That opportunity arrived in late 1953. The new French commander, Henri Navarre, decided to set a trap. He would build a massive airland base deep in a remote valley in northwestern Vietnam called Dien Bien Phu. The logic was pulled straight from the Vinh playbook. They'd build an indestructible fortress, a hedgehog, and dare Giap to attack it. Once Giap's army was clustered around the base, French planes and cannons would pound them into dust, just like they had before. It was designed to be the final, war-ending battle. Giap took the bait. This was the exact moment he had been waiting for. The French had just willingly walked into his trap. Where the French saw a flat valley floor perfect for an airstrip, Giap saw the jungle-covered hills that surrounded it, a perfect platform for his own artillery. What happened next was one of the greatest logistical feats of modern warfare. For months, tens of thousands of Viet Minh soldiers and civilian porters worked day and night, mostly by hand, to drag hundreds of heavy artillery cannons and anti-aircraft guns through miles of thick jungle and over steep mountains. They set up this artillery in heavily camouflaged, deeply dug-in bunkers on the hillsides overlooking the French base. The French command, who thought it was impossible to get artillery up there, had no idea it was even happening. When the battle began in March 1954, the French garrison was shocked to find itself buried under a relentless and devastatingly accurate artillery storm. The very air superiority that had saved them at Vinh was gone. Viet Minh anti-aircraft guns shredded French planes, making resupply missions a suicide run. The airstrip was destroyed, cutting the garrison off completely, except for risky parachute drops. Giap's soldiers dug a massive network of trenches, slowly tightening the noose around the French positions. After a brutal 56-day siege, the last French defenses fell. The volcano's victory was total. The showdown between Jean Delattre and Nguyen Giap was a duel between two military geniuses from two different worlds. Delattre, the Lion, was a master of modern, conventional warfare. His victory at Vinh was a tactical masterpiece that absolutely saved the French in 1951. But that very success blinded the French, leading them to believe that technology and firepower alone could win them the war. Giap, the volcano, lost that early battle but ended up winning the war. He learned from his crushing defeat, completely changed his strategy, and patiently waited for his enemy to make a fatal error. His victory at Dien Bien Phu wasn't just a military achievement. It was a triumph of logistics, engineering, and revolutionary will. It was a victory that shattered French morale and paved the way for the 1954 Geneva Accords, which marked the end of the First Indochina War and the final collapse of France's empire in Southeast Asia. The clash of these two titans didn't just decide the fate of Vietnam. It wrote a new playbook for how smaller nations could fight back against global superpowers, a lesson that would echo for decades to come.